Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be an interesting one. Frankly, I think this is going to be a very particular one because it is unnerving, uncomfortable, unsettling, but also kind of wholesome. Yeah, I mean like as wholesome as we can get on this channel, which is not very. What if I told you there was a potential serial killer on TikTok? You're probably wondering, bitch, what the fuck is this? And honestly, same here. The profile in question is called Psycho Prophet. The bio reads, "I am the Psycho Prophet and I am domesticated." Let's just look at their content. So when I scrolled back to their very initial content, a lot of it was unremarkable in the sense of it was just typical TikTok lip syncing or jokes, skits, nothing out of the ordinary. Then he had a series where he would tell you facts about serial killers. I am very unnerved by how he does this, and I'll show you two just as an example, and I'll explain why.
Awkward but interesting serial killer fact, part 28. Jeffrey Dahmer, the infamous serial killer, didn't wear his glasses in the courtroom because making eye contact makes him very uncomfortable. Awkward but interesting serial killer fact, part 29. Richard Chase, the infamous serial killer and cannibal, would only enter the houses of his victims if their doors were unlocked because he thought he was welcome into their homes.
While these two facts were interesting and everything, I'm assuming you guessed that what unnerved me is the smile at the end. Now, to be clear, there are plenty of reasons that people might smile nervously. I know I tend to laugh nervously, so smiling doesn't always just equate happy. However, the smile after the fact every time just makes me feel so uncomfortable and unnerved because I don't understand what the smile is like for. Like, you could easily end it without the smile, so I'm wondering why, you know? Is it supposed to be kind of like, wow, I just told you something super concerning? I don't know. So then another video came to my attention, which honestly scared the shit out of me.
Serial killer tricks that actually work because I know, because I use them, because I am a serial killer. Shit, I probably shouldn't confess that. Oh well. Trick number one. If you are going to become a serial killer, do not have a specific type of person that you're going to kill. You know, don't focus on just women or just men, you know. Keep it random and everything. Also, the manners of murdering, you should also keep random. Kill with a gun, kill with a knife, strangle a couple of people, you know, drown a couple of people, you know. Just make sure that they can't get a profile on you. That is the key.
That one I thought was kind of a skit, you know, kind of like a joke, and I love dark humor. The thing is, when he said, "I know because I use them," in terms of the tricks, I was kind of like, haha, but on the other hand, I was like, but should I laugh? And then enter a 10 parts TikTok series, so 10 TikToks, of him explaining something. I'm just gonna show you the parts. I'm gonna pause after every single part just to give you my reaction because obviously I didn't know where it was going when I first watched it, so I want to kind of explain where my head was at each part, if that makes sense. But stay until the end because it is fucking surprising.
This is the awkward but interesting story of me as a domesticated potential serial killer. It all started when I was born. To the age of 8, I came to the realization that I could not feel emotions at all. So I went to my father and I told him, you know, what I was going through. And he told me, to some people, feelings are like facial hair. Sometimes people are just born with it, and some people have to wait long periods of time for it to happen to them. So I was patient and said okay, and I just kept on going with my life. At the age of 10, I became very impatient, and I started like literally having tantrums. Part 2 soon.
First of all, the sole concept of figuring out that you don't have emotions is terrifying to me. Thankfully, I have not been in that position. Again, assuming this is true. Props to the father for reacting in a calm way. Now, he might have been freaking out in his head, because I know that if I had a little kid, my own child, came to me and was like, hey, I don't have feelings, I would be calling priests. I would be like, this is it, guys. I'm gonna die. This child is either a demon or there's something wrong, because how many times have you seen movies where the little kid is actually like Lucifer in disguise as a little kid, because little children are pure, but then one day the little pure child says something really ominous and the family's like, oh fuck. Just to be clear, this isn't me saying that everyone with antisocial personality disorder is a serial killer or a murderer. Clearly that's not my intention at all. I was just making a joke, because if a child said that to me, the first thing I think is Lucifer, because I've seen enough films to think that way, but that's not a comment on people who have antisocial personality disorder. I think it was cool that his dad was supportive, and hopefully, you know, between him and his wife, they looked into options as well, because that's a big deal to just not have feelings at age 8 to 10.
The awkward but interesting story of me as a domesticated potential serial killer. It really annoyed me that I couldn't feel anything emotionally, but my dad told me to just be patient. So, to the age of 10, I was riding my bike to clear my mind, and I fell off of it. I gashed my knee really badly. And I came to a realization. To feel something physical, I have to hurt myself. To feel something emotional, I have to hurt someone else. At that moment, at 10 years old, I realized I was going to become a serial killer. And that's how it began. Part 3 soon.
The sole concept of hurting myself so badly on a bike, and that being the time when I really realized, oh, pain is what makes me feel things, that I think would scare the shit out of me, even as a little kid, because obviously as an adult, there are a lot of implications that you wouldn't necessarily even think of or understand as a child. As someone who self-harms, I understand it to a tiny degree, what he's referring to, but obviously I'm not a murderer, so I don't understand the whole thing. The whole concept of being that young and thinking a thought like, yeah, I'm probably gonna end up being a serial killer because this is the only way I feel things, it's hard for me to grasp, and in a way it's also hard for me to believe. But then again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what kids think. I just associate 10-year-olds with what I was like when I was a 10-year-old. So obviously I don't relate, which is why it's hard for me to believe. But then again, like I said, it could be entirely true. I have no idea about child development and shit like that.
The awkward but interesting story of my life as a domesticated potential serial killer. At the age of 10, I decided that I was going to become a serial killer, but I did not want to disappoint my parents. My dad was a good man and a good provider, and my mother was very understanding and quite nurturing, so I didn't want to disappoint them. So I decided at the age of 18 I would start my emotional exploration. So from the age of 10 to 16, I just lived out a normal life. I went to school, I hung out with people. I was pretty distant, but I still tried to maintain, normacy. But at the age of 16, my father passed away. At that moment, I actually felt something. I felt depression, I felt sadness, and hatred, and anger.
So this part actually made me nervous because, I think even as someone who is not well versed in psychology, based on the movies I've seen, a lot of the times people who already kind of have this inclination towards being a murderer, let's say, there's like some kind of breaking point a lot of the times that I've seen, and I got nervous when he said this because I was like, oh no, his father, the person who was supportive of him, now is suddenly dead, and I was like, oh no, he's gonna fly off the handle, essentially.
The awkward but interesting story of me as a domesticated potential serial killer. So my father died, and I was depressed and sad, and I hated everything and everything. But I finally felt something in my life, and I felt it. And at the age of 16, I came to the realization that I was not going to murder for emotional exploration. I was actually had a new purpose. I was going to murder out of a new reason for me. Sorry, my hand's shaking. I was going to murder out of hatred for humans for taking my father from me. Sorry. For taking my father from me. And, I don't know. I'll be right back.
This part actually made me sad on his behalf, mainly because I feel like towards the end of the clip you can hear his voice is like breaking, so you can tell that, you know, like he really did care for his father. And in this instance, I started wondering, maybe you developed, you know, emotionally, maybe later than other people, but I was wondering, did you convince yourself that you didn't have emotions at a young age so deeply that when some came out, it was almost alarming? Does that make sense? Because you can totally be a late bloomer, but if you convinced yourself that you've not actually bloomed at all and that you're still exactly where you were before, like emotionally stunted, if you will, I feel like that could be something that happened here, because you can clearly tell that there was emotion for his father, aside from the anger that came with his father's death. And I'm not analyzing him as a psychologist or whatever, I'm just saying as a regular ass person, this is my thought, my take on what he's saying.
The story of my life is a domesticated potential serial killer. So I planned on becoming a serial killer still, but not for emotional exploration, but for the hatred for humans for taking my father from me. I started a new high school when I was 16 years old. And I found out that I really needed to be more normal. So I found a new group of people. I was still planning on doing it at the age of 18. So I found a group of friends, and I said, oh, wow, I should probably be more normal. So I found a girl, and I started dating her completely for the illusion of normacy. And I started dating her for a couple of months. I'll be back.
So when the girlfriend aspect came in, I got a little bit worried, because I was like, okay, well, if you kind of don't really relate to people or have emotions, what happens when you're, let's say, in close quarters with someone, at least emotionally? You know, like, what happens there? Does that make you feel things more, or does that maybe worsen your urges because there's someone right there that you could easily attack and kill? You know what I mean? Like, when we got to this point, I started getting kind of nervous, because I was like, oh no, this is all potentially going in a good path, but what if?
The awkward but interesting story of my life as a domesticated potential serial killer. So I started dating my girlfriend then for a couple of months, and I began to feel some sort of emotional constipation towards it. Because I was generally having a good time with her, and I started feeling positive emotions and everything, and it kind of irked me a little bit. So and I still had my thoughts of, you know, what I was going to do when I was 18 years old. So I tried. I'll be right back.
This is where I officially started sweating, because I was like, okay, this has to be a big deal. Whatever happened has to be enough of a big deal where he had to step back and come back to tell us. And I was like, oh shit. please tell me nothing bad happened with the girlfriend. And aside from that, again, if this is acting, I think he's quite a convincing actor in my opinion. Obviously, nobody except for him can know if it's true that he didn't have these emotions. You know, like, these things may all have happened, but the thing is, like, obviously these things can have happened with him having plenty of emotions and being a normal person, but he just removes that from the story. You know what I mean? So, like, I tend to believe him saying what happened. I'm more so skeptical of the emotional part, whether really there were no emotions. Like, I believe the story, it's just that aspect that I'm like, could easily be lied about, if that makes sense.
The story of my life is a domesticated potential serial killer. I was feeling emotional constipation towards my negative emotions, towards my positive emotions, towards my girlfriend and my friends. My friends were actually there for me and helping me a lot. And I tried to kill myself because I didn't know what to do with my life. I had all this positive emotion, but I still had all this negative emotion from my father's passing, and I still had all these thoughts of committing murder and everything. So I tried to take my own life. But my girlfriend at the moment texted me asking me what I was doing at that time. I'll be back. The story of my life as a domesticated potential serial killer. So I tried to kill myself, and my girlfriend at the time texted me asking me what I was doing. I still to this day blame my lack of blood, but I texted her telling her what I was gonna do. You know, I felt alone, I felt confused, I didn't know what to do, so I told her. Right after I sent that message, she called me and told me I can't kill myself because she doesn't know what part I play, but she knows that I'm going to be playing a very important part in her life, and I shouldn't do it. At that time, I didn't want to die.
The part where he says at that time I didn't want to die strikes a specific chord with me. Not to go into too much detail, but obviously if you've been following me for a while, you'll know I've been suicidal quite a few times. The feeling of not wanting to die once you've been feeling so ready to die is surreal. So that part really struck a chord with me. Now, I do want to preface, I'm a sucker for stories where someone comes into your life and changes your life so much that you actually want to continue living. The one thing is, I don't think we should confuse that with like the manic pixie dream girl, you know, like in movies, a guy hates his life, kind of like 500 Days of Summer, where he's kind of like dejected or whatever, and she comes in and fixes everything, or so he thought. You know, like, I don't like stories where someone saves you from yourself, because for the most part, it's like if they leave you, are you going to fall apart again, which I think is a very depressing thought. And aside from that, I think most of the time people can save you from yourself, but the small detail is that they made you realize something about yourself, and in that way they helped you because they helped you make a realization, but it's not just their entire being, it's their perspective. You know what I mean? And I think there's a stark difference between the two, because overall, this whole concept of someone saving someone, generally, I don't really like it. Anyway, you'll see why I mention this.
The story of my life as a domesticated potential serial killer. My girlfriend told me that she doesn't know what role I'm going to be playing in her life, but she knows that it is an important one. So I called a friend of mine from my old childhood neighborhood, and I told him to do me a favor to stitch me up, and he did. He stitched me up, and I thanked him for it. The next day, it was the first time I actually told my girlfriend I loved her. And it was the first time I actually felt real emotions at the age of 16. I'm not a killer. I'm a good man.
Okay, this part in one way made my rom-com loving self a little ooh-woo, a little like, I thought it was wholesome, I'm just gonna leave it at that. On the other hand, it's also like, this part made me a little bit skeptical because it feels so cinematic, this kind of realization of, my God, I can feel something, I'm not a killer, I'm a good person. And that's not to say that I don't believe it, but it feels like such a larger than life realization to make that it's hard for me to compute. Does that make sense? Let's listen to the last part, because after that, that's where my real comments are gonna come in.
The story of my life as a domesticated potential serial killer. This would be my last episode. I'm engaged to that girlfriend right now. I've been with her for 10 years. I'm 26 years old. I've never killed anybody in my entire life. I do have urges once in a while. They usually peak when my anxiety kicks in. My girlfriend saved my life and a lot of people's lives. I love her more than anything. I'm not a sociopath. I was at a young age. I'm not now. I do occasionally get urges. I fight them every fucking day. My life is a never-ending battle. Thank you for listening.
So, while the story ended well, I have concerns. This is why I was saying what I was saying before about someone quote-unquote saving you. What happens when something happens, you break up, something happens to her, for some reason she's not in your life anymore? How do you handle that? I'm not here saying he wouldn't know how, or he'd start killing or whatever, but that's the problem that I see with the whole savior complex, is that they should help you realize something about yourself. And of course, if you love someone, you always want them to be in your life, but it should also be like, if the person isn't there, you can still be a non-killing human, not be a serial killer without her, if that makes sense. And as much as I like the wholesomeness of it, a lot of questions come up too because of the prior clip. Remember the first one where he's like, here are tips for serial killers, because I am one. He had used present tense. So I'm not saying he did kill someone, and I realize it could fully be a joke, but you also have to ask yourself questions like, how is it possible that a person who is so sure that they're a killer since a young age, how have they been able to, stop themselves? So I wonder if there's therapy involved, or if there's medication. If there isn't, there should be one or the other, or both, depending on what a medical professional says. But there are just so many questions in my head, and of course this could have been done to get attention, though I don't really know who would want attention for being a serial killer unless they're wanting attention of people who gravitate towards that, which is a whole other can of worms. But I just thought it was so surreal to me, because apps like TikTok and Instagram, as opposed to YouTube and Twitter, for me, are lighthearted, silly, it's also based on who you follow, of course, but I don't get my news from Instagram, for example. I might get them from Twitter, but on Instagram, it's pretty pictures, pretty girls, models, there's nothing. I don't think Instagram really is a platform for most people where they get news. They might share things, but I don't feel like I opened that app expecting to see, okay, what's new in the world today. And it's the same on TikTok. I kind of expect to see animals or like a skit or something. So it even felt surreal that someone was talking about something so heavy on an app that, to me, has always equated to silliness, if that makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense to you guys. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you think he's honest, if he's trolling. What do you think is going on here? Let me know. I'm very curious. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the fan art.